Hi everybody, Scott here, Kisha's husband. I wanted to answer a few questions that people have sent in. I said I'd answer a few car questions, more specifically toward getting automobile financing. I guess the quick answer to that is there's not any real secrets, but there are a few ingredients that have to happen. The way I teach my people, as far as my employees, as far as what banks look for or the things that we should have when we're trying to put a car deal together, if you can imagine it very much like a bar stool, and a bar stool having 4 legs. The 4 things that a bank will look for when they're deciding whether or not to approve a car deal are going to be the ability to pay, the stability of the customer, the equity, which I'll come back to in a minute, in the automobile they're looking at, and their previous credit history. Okay, those are the 4 things. And again, imagining like a bar stool, without one of those things, you can still sit on a bar stool with 3 legs. And you take out another one, it's really tough to sit on a bar stool with 2 legs, and you're absolutely going to bust your ass with just the one. So that being said, the most important in that group is probably your previous credit history. Okay, but for those of you that don't have a credit history, or just getting started is a better way of phrasing that, all hope is not lost. There are several things that will help your cause. Excuse me, one of the biggest things that when a bank makes a decision to loan money or not is the position you are with the automobile. We call that the equity position. What that means is I'll just use it as for example, we'll call it a $10,000 automobile. And when a bank looks at whether or not they're going to loan someone money, what you as a consumer looks at are the retail figures, and that's based on, and most banks will base it off of the NADA book, not off of Kelley Blue Book. They will also base it off what's called clean trade-in. If anyone has any idea as far as, hey, I want to know what this car's worth or that car's worth, you can do that online, NADA.com, November Alpha, Delta Alpha, NADA, National Automobile Dealers Association.com, and you can look up the specific vehicle that you're looking for. What the bank is going to base what they're loaning against is going to be based off of clean trade for most people. There are certain banks that loan against retail, but that's generally speaking for better credit customers. Now, for those of you who are trying to get started or have no credit at all and want to buy a car, the next key elements are going to be the bank is going to look at your monthly income, and generally speaking for an individual, for a bank to want to loan money without a cosigner is going to be $1,800 gross monthly income at a minimum. Now, that being said, they also want to look at your living expenses and things like that, so things such as your rent, additional payments you may have for food, groceries, insurance, and things like that, which they will factor in on their own. But they want to make sure that 50% of your income or less is not already spoken for. And they also want to compare to, they'll call it DTI, or debt to income. Your debt to income level can't exceed 50% inclusive of the new payment. And for you first-time buyers or people who are getting started, they're automatically going to debt you a certain amount for automobile insurance as well as the car payment in and of itself. There are several companies out there that I guess if you will, specialize in for first-time buyers. And different manufacturers are better with first-time buyers. Hello, Kitty. There are different manufacturers that are better with first-time buyers than others. In most cases, as far as getting yourself established, if you're not looking at a brand new car, which a lot of times is tougher than buying a used car, for the brand new car, you want to deal with the manufacturer, people like Toyota and Honda. Honda right now is pretty aggressive as far as allowing people to buy. The things that they're going to ask you to do as a first-time buyer is prove everything you tell them, because generally speaking, you're an unknown quantity, and what I mean by that is they're going to ask for verification of your residence, they're going to ask for verification of your income, which would be a check stub, and it needs to be a check stub with taxes taken out and those type of things. For those of you that are 1099 or self-employed people, they'll want 2 years tax returns. Anyway, all that being said, what you want to do ultimately is put yourself in a position to where it makes it less risk involved for the bank, because at the end of the day, that's all they really care about is how much risk is involved in establishing that loan. The more you can minimize that risk, the better your opportunity of gaining an approval, if you will, or getting a car. So generally speaking, you're going to want to start off something that's not too extravagant. In most cases, they're looking in an $8,000 to $12,000 range, but the dollar range is not nearly as important as the automobile. Most banks are going to look at 7 years, 6 years in most cases, 7 years in some, years of age or newer on the automobile. And a big key is the mileage. In most cases for first-time buyers, they don't want to see the mileage exceed 80,000 miles. So that gets to be kind of a tricky thing when you're looking for a specific type of car that may or may not following those guidelines. A lot of people think, well, this is my first car, so I've got to buy something that's $5,000 or $6,000, or I have to buy something that's significantly older. And the reality is that actually hurts your cause. And the reason for that is because the older the vehicle, the more mileage, the less likely it is to make it to the term of the loan, so that automatically increases the risk for the bank, so the less likely they are to approve you on that automobile. So kind of the big keys here are put yourself in a position to where you minimize the risk for the bank. And how you do that, very simply, is let's say that we have this car, and let's just call it, I don't know, we'll call it an '08 Toyota Corolla or something that has a trade-in value, what I call clean trade, which is what the bank looks at, of $10,000. Are you trying to borrow $12,000, or are you trying to borrow $8,000? That's the first thing the bank's going to look at, and they want to know, what's my risk as far as the dollar figure. And then the next thing they're going to look at is your overall ability or stability in that order. Your ability to pay, in other words, does your income match where they would put you as far as the payment? They don't want your payment to exceed a certain percentage of your income, very much like I talked earlier about your debt to income. Your payment to income shouldn't exceed, well, in most cases, it's 12% is the magic number, but in most cases, if they really stretch, 16% is all in with both feet for most financial institutions. When I say that, let's say, for example, you make $2,000 a month, 14% of your income is $280. So they don't want that payment to exceed $280. Now, that being said, there are also the factors that are going to come into play after that are going to be the age of the unit, how old it is, and and how many miles it has on it. And those two things will determine how many months will be the allowable amount of finance. The next thing that they're going to do is establish or assign an interest rate that would go with your personal credit history, or if there is no credit history, they would consider you the highest risk grade. Generally speaking, they'll grade it very much like your grades you received when you were in school, A, B, C, D, and then of course the dreaded other. But anyway, you want to put yourself in a position to be successful, and what I mean by that is, generally speaking, have some down payment saved up if you can. That's usually your best plan. Put yourself in the mindset that when I can speak for when my parents started buying things, homes, cars, houses, things like that, many years ago, and you used to have to put 20% down or else you didn't finance anything. The banks would simply tell you, no, thank you. And in today's modern era, the banks have become more liberal, so they've loaned more money, but the reality is that that's still deep-rooted in there. So that's kind of where the break point is. And so if you're looking at a vehicle, and we'll go back and call it that '08 Toyota Corolla that has a trade-in value of $10,000, the car lot you're looking at says, well, we want $11,300 for it, let's call it. You're going to need to have enough money to cover the difference between the $10,000 and the $11,300, which is $1,300, plus your taxes, depending on where you are, in addition to the dealer fee. So that might be as much as $3,000 or $3,500 to put yourself in a position to only borrow $8,000, because the bank considers tax, tag, license, and the dealer fees all just additional things that should be your responsibility. But anyway, as I mentioned, the trick is to put yourself in a position to be successful. Now, if you are a first-time buyer and you have a little bit of advance notice before you're going to be having to get your car, one of the quickest and best ways to build your credit is secured credit cards. They actually help build your score a little bit. Now, they're not going to give you everything the bank is looking for, but having some established credit history in a positive fashion is better than having none at all. And we'll talk a little bit later as far as bad credit is concerned, because actually there are a lot of institutions out there that specialize in bad credit. But for your first-time buyers, again, understand you're just trying to put yourself in a position to where you're lowering the risk rate for the bank. And how you do that, very simple. In our industry, or the auto industry, they say cash is king, and there's a lot of truth to that. The more cash that you can put yourself in a position to be successful with, or put into the deal to put yourself in a position to be successful for an approval. And ultimately, that's what you want to do. If you're going in to buy a car, you want to go in and put yourself in a position to where the bank has a better chance of saying yes than they do of saying no. And always the best answer for most situations in the auto industry is more money. And the more money that you can invest, the better off you are. Now, if you can't invest $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 as a first-time buyer, generally speaking, most banks are going to have a minimum investment of $1,000 and or 10% of the vehicle's value. So for those of you that say, hey, I can't come up with $3,000, $4,000, that's okay. I understand. It's tough. The economy's tough. So put yourself in a position where you have at least $1,000, and then also look at a vehicle that makes sense. When I say by that, if nothing wrong with it, let's say that you're an assistant manager at McDonald's and you make $2,300 a month, don't go look at a $60,000 car. obviously that's going to not make sense. So what you want to do is find something that A, is going to fit your wants and needs, and give that some consideration. Spend some time doing some research on the internet is usually the best way to do that. There's a lot of information out there, but beware of that, because you don't want to make yourself an educated idiot, if you will. You don't want to go in with all the answers and then not really be able to back up with your position. You don't want to go in and tell everyone what you know and how you can do it without being able to put yourself in a position to be successful. So, being a little bit humble and just saying, hey, this is where I'm at. One thing you want to be leery of is if you are a first-time buyer and you do approach a car dealership about buying a car, make very certain that before you buy that car, you're prepared to buy that car, that it is the car you want. Because if you just tell them, hey, I'd like to see if I can get approved, you will more hurt yourself than help yourself, because most car dealerships have inexperienced people in the business office or finance office, and what ends up happening is they'll send you to a lot of different financial places, and you'll have 15 inquiries before you actually find the true car that you want to buy, or someone that can't actually help you. So you end up hurting yourself more so than helping yourself. So again, just to recap, guys, the 4 things the banks are going to look for: ability, stability, equity, and credit. The ability, do you have the ability to pay them back? In other words, that's based on your income. I talked about that percentage. You want to make sure that you put yourself in a position to where your payment should be a certain percentage of your income, and that's something you'll have to work your budget out. In most cases, starting off, because you're a first-time buyer, the interest rate is going to be a little bit higher, and generally speaking, the term will be a little shorter. So what that means is that the payment in relation to the amount of money borrowed will be a little bit higher than not. So a good rule of thumb, on a first-time buyer, you're going to want to figure $25 to $30 for every $1,000 you're looking at financing. Once you've established credit and you have decent credit, that number goes down to about 20. And for people with excellent credit, and moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas, people that own their homes, jobs, those type of things who have done well, that number could get down to as little as $15 or $16. But again, budget for $20 to $25 for every $1,000 you plan on financing. Okay, that's the ability. The next is stability. How long have you been at your residence? How long have you been on your job? Generally speaking, the bank is going to look for 2 and 2. 2 years residence time, 2 years job time. Okay. Then the next thing is equity. In other words, like we talked, you want to put yourself in a position to eliminate or lower their risk. And so if you're looking at that car that has a $10,000 book, let's try to get that number down to about $8,000 so that it makes sense for the bank. And so, you have to kind of put yourself in their position. If they had to come repossess the car in 2 months, what would happen? Would they lose money, or would they break out, or would they be in deep trouble because they've lent you 11.5 and the car is only going to bring, let's say, 9 at the auction? Now they've got $2,500 that they can't make up for. Let's say the opposite's true, and you've put the money down, and now the car's you've only borrowed 8, and they have to take it to the auction. They're going to make $9,500. You've lowered their risk, so they're more likely to say yes. Okay. So again, ability, stability, equity, and the last thing is credit. And if you're a first-time buyer, obviously you're not going to have that. If you have the opportunity to get yourself a secured credit card, there's a lot of them out there that do it. Most of your own financial institutions, you may or may not know it, most banks will allow you to do so. And you can do it very simply. Just go in and sit down with one of the bank managers and say, hey, listen, I'd like to open a secure card because I have no credit. And what they'll ask of you is some type of deposit, and you can make that pretty much almost anything you want. And generally speaking, the minimum is going to be around $200, and most of them are going to cap out around $5,000. So just depending on how much you have there. For those of you that don't know, with revolving credit, the big key there is don't ever charge more than 60% of your credit limit. So if your credit limit's $1,000, don't ever charge more than $600, and try to pay it down as quickly as you can, ideally paying it off at the end of each month. That being said, that's the fastest way to get your credit score to come up, but not necessarily gives you the full package. But if you get a good credit score, a good start, get yourself a good record to run on, it should be fairly simple in the process. But again, if you don't have anything, or you don't have time to get out and get yourself that car, but you do still need a car, again, just remember to try to put yourself in the best position possible. Try to find yourself an experienced salesperson. Be upfront with them. Also ask them not to pull your credit, because just tell them, hey, listen, I don't have any credit. Now, I say any credit. Guys, keep in mind, you can have bad credit and not know it. Just because you haven't financed a car doesn't mean you don't have bad credit. There are a lot of things out there, such as medical collections, cable bills, those kind of things that all count against you, but don't help you if you actually pay them on time. If you pay them on time, they don't tell anybody. But if you don't, they sure tell everybody they know. The old saying, if you treat somebody right, they tell 1 or 2 people. You treat them wrong, they tell everybody they know. It works the same way with your creditors, or places like hospitals or doctors or those kind of things. Okay, so folks, folks, if you're sure you have no credit and you're a true zero credit score, make sure and let them know that and ask them not to pull your credit because you don't want to harm yourself until you're certain of the car. If you're not sure if you have all those collections out there, it may be a good idea to go ahead and pull your credit yourself and take a look. You can do that at freeannualcreditreport.com is a good source for that. Also, another source that as far as monitoring your credit is concerned, they have Credit Karma is another good one out there. They specifically use TransUnion Credit Service. Most of the banks in our area, which happens to be South Carolina, but most of the banks in the Midwest and Northeast use Equifax. And generally speaking, you'll see TransUnion used more specifically in the South and Southwest. But anyway, TransUnion is a good gauge because most of the bureaus are going to be pretty similar. So again, if you don't know, check your TransUnion through Credit Karma, check it through annualcreditreport.com, and then it kind of gives you a little bit of guidance. But again, the best thing for you to do is put yourself in a position to be successful, and the best way to do that is find yourself an experienced salesperson, be straightforward with them, tell them what he's dealing with, tell them what you're trying to accomplish. Sit down and share your goals with them and tell them where you want to end up. And generally speaking, a good experienced salesperson can help you to do that. And again, if you have any questions, just feel free to leave them on Kisha's blog. I'll be happy to answer specific questions if I need to. So anyway, next week I'm going to come back and talk to you guys about some tips on how to fix bad credit. Tonight I wanted to focus on getting established. Bad credit's a whole other animal, something that I've had quite a bit of experience with as far as helping people to reestablish their credit once they've had some oopses. My dad used to tell me it takes 100 attaboys to make up for one oh shit. Yeah, that's kind of true, but there are some ways around it. So anyway, once again, hope you guys have a good night, and we'll see you next week.